Hey everybody, welcome to Sama. It's another edition of Sama, Sales, Circuit, Music, and Art. I have a special guest tonight, somebody I've known for a little bit. He is a trumpet player. His name is Sonny Singh. He's Brooklyn-based, and he's launched a solo project inspired by the spiritual tradition of Sikh kirtan with boundary-defying Punjabi anthems to uplift and ignite. For the last decade, Sonny has brought his energy to audiences around the world as an original member of the Bhangra brass band Red Baraat. I've had them on my show on KXP a couple of times, and they're fabulous. Check them out on our YouTube channel, KXP's YouTube channel. They toured heavily and released 5 studio albums. Sonny currently is finishing up his debut solo album produced by Wil-Dog Abers of Ozomatli. Love Ozomatli. It's entitled Chardi Kala, the Sikh concept of revolutionary eternal optimism. Chardi Kala is a return to his Punjabi-Sikh musical and spiritual roots with the lens he's developed over the course of his life as a touring musician, educator, and activist. I am jazzed beyond belief to have Sonny Singh on. The record is coming. On my show, I played a few of the singles, and they're fabulous. You're going to love them. But to get to know Sonny a little bit more, as often, we're going to play a little video where he's talking about himself. And then we'll have Sonny on. We'll talk a little bit more. Thanks for checking out Sama.
My name is Sonny Singh. I'm a Brooklyn-based musician and activist, and I'm recording my first solo album called Chardi Kala. I'm a trumpet player, singer, dhol player, songwriter, and for the last 10 years or so, I've been playing in a Brooklyn bhangra band called Red Baraat. Now, after about 15 years of working as a professional musician in New York City and touring the world, I am branching out and recording my first solo album. The concept and title of the album is Chardi Kala, which is a concept in Sikhism and in the Sikh community of eternal optimism. And that's precisely what I hope this album makes people feel. This album is sort of my personal gospel album in a sense, right? This album reflects the musical palette that has shaped me throughout my life. My first musical outlet was doing kirtan, which is Sikh devotional music. I began by revisiting some of the tunes, some of the shabads that I used to play when I was a kid. And then eventually started writing my own music to some of these really powerful poems. In the days that we're living in right now, I really felt the need to turn back to this poetry that was written by Sikh gurus, by Sufi poets, to draw inspiration for my own political and creative life now. I know that when I play this music, when I sing these shabads and these songs, that I feel more hopeful about our future. So I'm so fortunate to be working with the producer, Wil-Dog Abers, who's an old friend of mine, who is the founding member and bass player in Ozomatli, which is a band from LA. If you don't know them, they've won 3 Grammys. We're really lucky to have a really incredible community of musicians who are a part of this. And the reality is, for better or for worse, it takes a lot of money to make a full album. We've done a lot on our own thus far financially, but we're getting to a point where in order to finish the album, we need our community to back this and help bring it to life. I would really love any support you're able to give, if that's $1, if that's $5, if that's $200, or if that's just sharing this with somebody you think it would mean a lot to. I think more than ever right now, we need music that lifts us up. We need music that provides us with inspiration to continue fighting, to continue working towards a better world, to continue to understand each other better. And I think this album could have that impact.
All right. That was beautiful. Sonny Singh, welcome to Sama.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you holding up?
Doing okay. Obviously, it's been quite a year, quite a week. Really devastating few days. It's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot to process, and music grounds me, and I think grounds many of us.
What got you into music? What was the thing? I always start with this because there's so many things to do in life.
Yeah,
What was it that made music like, hey, this?
Yeah, when I was a kid, it really did. It really did start from the spiritual angle. That was some of my first exposure to music. Some of my first times playing music was in a Sikh devotional context, and it was something that I did because a lot of Sikh kids did it. My parents wanted me to do it, even though there's no musicians in my family. It was this sort of way to connect with our community, connect with our history, and when I became a trumpet player in school band, I think something about that resonance, something about diving into sort of like the tones and melodies that instrument creates, it just became a really important part of my personality, an important part of my expression, and that really kind of clicked in high school, I'd say. Mostly, honestly, playing Western classical music.
Hmm.
And it's been a windy road since then of bringing a lot of different influences musically, culturally, spiritually that have influenced me, and birthing this new project in a way is bringing a lot of those things together. But yeah, I think in high school is when I started to really find my musical voice, and that was first as a trumpet player.
Okay. We don't know much about Sikh devotional music. We don't know much about kirtan. Generally, some of us do. Tell me something about this. Tell me about. This is an interesting title. Obviously, it's wonderfully provocative in light of what's been going on in the world. But tell me a little bit about this spiritual practice and this culture.
Yeah, for sure. So, in the Sikh community, music is just a kind of crucial way of how we connect to the divine and how we pray. So, if you go to any Sikh house of worship, which we call a gurdwara, and there's gurdwaras all over the United States and in pretty much every major city and lots of minor cities and towns too. What you'll see happening, at least during non-pandemic times, is mostly music. You'll see a group of musicians, usually playing the harmonium, which is a pump keyboard instrument, and the tabla, which are hand drums that a lot of people are probably familiar with, and singing these beautiful, what we call shabads, which are sort of, literally it means word, but it's sort of this spiritual poetry, this sacred poetry. The six scriptures, which we call the Guru Granth Sahib, it's like over 1,400 pages of beautiful poetry, written not only by Sikh gurus or Sikh saints, but also by Sufi saints, also by folks who are part of the sort of radical Bhakti tradition. So all these sort of free-thinking philosopher, poet, saints, starting from the 14th century to the 17th century, really talking about how do we get free? How do we connect to the divine? How do we tear down all forms of oppression? And this poetry is deeply inspiring, obviously, not only to the Sikh community, but lots of South Asians and beyond. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, it's not just poetry, but before each shabad or poem, it actually tells you what rag to sing it in. And for those who are not familiar, rag is a classical South Asian musical scale or mode, sort of more specifically for the musicians listening. So it actually each shabad is intended to sort of like have a particular rag or sort of like mood to it almost. So this poetry is meant to be sung, and so that's what we do. And these days, not everyone sticks to the traditional rags. Originally, this stuff was played primarily on stringed instruments that are not super common anymore. But this was a way, a lot of these poems are really provocative, asking a lot of questions, around the various ways that injustice and sort of dogmatic, rigid ideologies were pervading South Asian society during that time. And unfortunately, are still pervading South Asian society as well as American society. Yeah. So it feels really relevant to sort of breathe this life into this poetry, scripture, if you want to call it that, because it is that to us. I think it's a universal message in a lot of ways.
Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. Let's have people hear this. Can we play the Chardi Kala music video right now?
Yeah, let's do it. And so Chardi Kala, for context, isn't strictly devotional, but the words, many of the words in it are taken from sort of sayings in the Sikh community and in the Punjabi community. And then a few of the lines are a part of Sikh prayers. And maybe after we watch it, I'm happy to explain what it means.
Please. And just let me ask you a question. Like when the shit hit the fan on many levels, the last administration, the pandemic, and all this, one of the things that I discovered starting Sama is that these musical traditions and these ancient traditions really were there to help through hard times. It's not so much like celebration. There were few, in our history. There was more like the blues, shall we say, or like these spiritual songs to kind of help you through this time. We've had, this has been a very challenging time. Globally now with the pandemic in the United States. Did you feel like this sense of urgency, purpose, like this feeling of like, if not now, when you were writing this? Or was this something that you were thinking, you're an activist and it's like, this is a difficult time, but it's been difficult for a long time, depending on the shade of your immigrant status, the shade of your color, of your skin, etc.
Yeah.
But was this like, did you come to a place where you're like, now more, or was this bubbling for a while?
I think a little of both, but I will tell you the specific moment that I started writing this music was in 2018. So we're a bit into the Trump administration with growing white nationalism seeping out of all aspects of our society, including the White House, including every police department in this country, right? And I think Bolsonaro had just been elected. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India's popularity was just ever growing. And it really felt like a time, there's this sort of like global far right kind of neo-fascist wave across the planet that is still with us, of course, and hopefully we're pushing back on that. But it really felt like a time of despair in many ways, and I found myself, for the first time in a decade or two, pulling out my harmonium and just sort of like remembering some of these shabads that I sang as a child, and it. It's like I am a spiritual person. I wouldn't call myself a religious person with a capital R, but I think it is something very human to for those of us whose like every step is not determined by prayer. Like we're not like, I'm not devout with a capital D, right? Like I'm not doing the prayers that super devout Sikhs do every day, right? Like that's not the way my spiritual practice manifests. However, in times of despair, like it's such a human thing to need that, right?
Yeah.
And I think up until that point, music was that for me, just in and of itself. So I'd say any kind of music that I've been playing for the last decade has had a deeply spiritual aspect to it, and maybe we'll talk about that later and like what that means. But sort of revisiting kirtan, revisiting these shabads was really cathartic for me, and really like revisiting the meaning of these shabads too, and trying to understand them better. And so I just started making these little Instagram videos of me, like the a cappella videos where they've become very popular during pandemic times because it's the only time it's the only way we can play with other people. But I was doing like, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 Sonnies, playing a few trumpets, playing a few layers of vocals. You saw a little bit of it in the intro video. So, and it really seemed to be resonating with others as well. So that just sort of fueled me to keep on digging in, and then eventually writing some of my own music. And yeah, this idea of Chardi Kala, eternal optimism, ever rising spirits, is one that just feels, from the Sikh context, it came about in very dark times, not unlike our own, and probably darker in many ways. And Sikhs are a revolutionary people. It's sort of why we exist, right? The Sikh movement grew out of an anti-caste revolution. That's caste with the E at the end, right? This ancient form of oppression and hierarchy, sort of baked into the Vedas and a lot of Hindu philosophy. And Sikhi was this spiritual and political revolution against that, and against religious intolerance, and against sexism. And so, not surprisingly, Sikhs had targets on their backs for many hundreds of years, and in some ways still do, because surprise, surprise, revolutionaries often aren't very popular with those in power. And so even when the situation was so dire that there was literally like the price on the head of a Sikh, right, during certain periods of the Mughal Empire, Sikhs had this idea that we will remain in Chardi Kala, right? Like no matter what. It is our spiritual duty and our political duty to remain in high spirits. It's that sort of steadfast determination to believe that we can achieve justice, right? And that's a part of what it means to be connected with the divine. And so that to me feels like such a important message for the times we're living in right now, and the times that I wrote this album in, right, in a couple of years into the Trump administration.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Let's see it.
Chardi Kala
Sonny Singh on Sama. That's beautiful. Where was that filmed?
So it was filmed in a village called Nardu near Patiala in Punjab. And then the parts that I'm in are in Brooklyn, New York.
All right. Lovely work. Tell me about your youth.
Well, I grew up, I'm the child of immigrant parents. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, actually. And yeah, in many ways, a pretty common story for parents of my generation who got access to student visas in the United States after the change in immigration law in 1965, which made it really easy for people from Asia, in particular, to come to the U.S. to study things like engineering, medicine, right? The birth of this whole quote unquote model minority myth, right? Which obviously has nothing to do with our DNA as South Asians or even our culture, right? But has to do with immigration policy and really used. This is a funny way of answering a question about my youth, but you'll see this is what I tend to do.
That's fine. It's fine. No, it's great. It's great.
But yeah, you know, my parents were a part of that generation of Indian Americans and Asian Americans who already had some access to education before they got here, and had a little bit of access to middle class lifestyle in India, and really were used as tools against people of color in the United States, right? Particularly Black folks, Latino folks, Indigenous folks, and so that's whenever I talk about my family's history, I have to talk about the need to challenge this idea of the model minority, which was really used as a way to perpetuate anti-Black racism, right?
Yeah.
Which is certainly insidious in many immigrant communities, and the South Asian community is no different. But for my childhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, kids on the playground would ask me, "Are you Black or white?"
Yeah.
and me, like 8-year-old Sonny, I'm just like I didn't know what the answer was, but I did know that being white would be much better for me, right? I did know that the popular kids were white, right? The kids that lived in the nicer neighborhoods were white. So I saw that the realities of white supremacy from a very young age, before I had the vocabulary or the analysis to talk about it, or talk about the bullying and racist harassment that I was experiencing on a very, very regular basis throughout my childhood and into my adult life as well.
Ah, okay. So you grew up in the South. That's interesting.
I sure did.
Let's go into. I have a couple of questions on that. Let me just. Was that, when you think of like Sikh communities, you think of South Asian communities, you're thinking of like Charlotte's a big city, but you're thinking of other places where there's a larger group. Did you have a large group? Did you have other immigrants around you, or were you just like? Yeah.
I mean, I think that the question that those kids asked me on the playground is pretty indicative of what the vibe was in Charlotte at the time. I grew up in the 80s. Then there was a pretty small South Asian community in Charlotte, and a minuscule Sikh community. And in fact, I can say without exaggeration that growing up in the 80s, my brother and I were the only two Sikh boys in the city of Charlotte who wore turbans. Like, we were the only Sikh, turban wearing Sikh boys. There was a couple of other Sikh families in Charlotte. And just like every faith, we have plenty of folks who cut their hair, who don't wear turbans, etc. And my brother and I were the only turban wearing Sikh boys growing up in Charlotte in the 80s, because my parents pretty much didn't only know every single Sikh family, they knew every single Indian family in Charlotte, because the community was that small. So there was a deep feeling of isolation in that sense. It was really, really difficult. But also, I had a lot of great friends too. Other children of immigrant Indian folks who were not Sikh, a few who did come from Sikh families, and then plenty of other kids too. But my childhood was definitely very shaped by just the battle of racist bullying. School was a tough situation for.
What was your relationship like with the African American kids your age that were in Charlotte?
When I was young, I don't think I had developed any sense of sort of solidarity or common struggle yet. And there's so many subtle and not so subtle ways that I grew up with so many racist stereotypes about Black folks, right? Like that stuff runs deep in our community. And my upbringing was no exception, unfortunately. And it wasn't until and I think this was all for me as a kid operating on a pretty subtle level. But my school in Charlotte was in a Black neighborhood. I lived in a mostly white neighborhood, not quite in the suburbs, but a more white kind of middle class neighborhood in Charlotte. And I was bused into downtown Charlotte, which at the time was a working class Black neighborhood, and that was totally cool. No, like as a child, I didn't really have any feelings one way or another about that. I'm grateful for, Mecklenburg County was actually one of the first maybe the first county in the country to integrate schools through busing. And for me, it was a positive experience. But that being said, I wasn't developing meaningful relationships with most of my Black classmates, right? I didn't see connection with them. And I saw, I was drinking the white supremacist Kool-Aid, right? Like I wanted to be white. Like I wanted to assimilate. I wanted to do whatever I could to fit in. And assimilating towards Blackness, which some children of immigrants do end up going more in that direction and getting deep into hip hop culture and deeply inspired by various forms of Black cultural resistance. That wasn't my route as a kid. My route was like, how can I fit in and be more white? And I mean, it's hard to admit that, right? Like that's a painful thing to say out loud, but it's true.
Yeah. It's similar. I mean, I'm an immigrant, and I grew up in a part of Boston with a large African American population, and it was the first time I experienced that because we just didn't have that in Poland, and it was fascinating just going through that whole process of like I fell in love with the music, I fell in love with the culture. It was so welcoming. Until I ran into racists who were like, what are you doing hanging out with these kids?
Yeah.
You're one of us or the other. And so I'm always intrigued, how that process works because now we're at least facing it and gratefully. And I'm intrigued in the power of music and how it can, that music really drew me. And I'm always curious in like where it's such a wonderful way to present a culture that circumvents the propaganda, it circumvents the assumptions people have about, you look at that video and you're like, it's beautiful. The music is beautiful. This is a beautiful image of a culture. And it's such a great way to do that. So thanks for doing it. And thanks for sharing your story. Let's hear some music right now. We could talk for freaking hours about this, but let's hear some music.
It's true. We could. Sure. I'm gonna play one live for us.
Okay.
And this is a shabad, so this is a Sikh devotional song called Tirgar Beso that I actually learned when I was a child. I learned it probably at the age of like 12 or 13, and when I started exploring the idea of the album, this was one that I wanted to sort of see where it went genre wise, and this is the direction that it's going. Let me just pick up my trumpet here. Tirgar beso har jan pyare satgur tumhare kaaj sware tirgar beso har jan pyare satgur tumhare kaaj sware dusta duta parmesar mare janki pej rakhi karta re paad saha saha sab vas kar bhive amrit naam maharas जो भगवान साध संगत मिल कीनो दान शरण परे प्रभु अंतर जामी नानक योट पकड़ी प्रभु स्वामी तिर कर बैसो अर्जुन प्यारे सतगुरु तुम्हारे काज सवारे तिर कर बैसो.
Sonny Singh. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me what the song's about.
So this is a devotional song that I can read a couple of lines from it. It was written by Guru Arjan, who's the fifth guru of the Sikhs. So this comes from the 16th century. And the main line says, "Those beloved people of the omnipresent divine, make this thought stable in your heart. The true guru will take care of all of your affairs." And then another line that I sang, "The people are sovereign, not under the rule of any shahs or emperors. They drink the most divine tasting ambrosial nectar." So for me, aside from being this sort of kind of comfort and stability in that connection with the divine, this is also a piece that's about sovereignty and about the importance of challenging tyranny and oppression, right? Which is something that's so key. So the people are sovereign, not under the rule of any shahs or emperors. Very, very direct, right? Very, very direct. This idea of sovereignty is super important in the Sikh community, and that doesn't necessarily mean in terms of a nation state, but really, what is it? Though some people think that it should, but really, what does it mean to be free, right? What does it mean to be sovereign? What does it mean to be liberated? And so that to me is what I think about when I sing this one.
Beautiful. Thank you. Within the Sikh community, there are certain totems. Maybe it's the wrong word for it, but you've got the bracelet, you've got a blade. What's the other?
The Articles of Faith. Yeah.
Articles of Faith, yes.
Yeah. Unshorn hair. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And those are, symbols of we're going to be ourselves, and we're going to defend ourselves if we're going to be. And so it's intriguing in the context of the times that we're living in right now, where you're tapping into these traditions which empower you, create a sense of guidance through this path. And it, in our conversation, it's like, it's not uncharted. This thing has been going on throughout history. One group of people is trying to oppress another group of people. And you living in Charlotte, your parents are immigrants. What is your relationship with home? Like, what is your relationship with their home? With the situation in India right now is very complicated, very challenging, and you're creating music and you're creating statements about that. But tell me more about your personal relationship with this heritage.
Yeah, it's very multi-layered. I think in a very sort of beyond borders kind of way when I think about geography, when I think about nation, when I think about homelands. I think borders have done only bad for humanity, and India is no exception, right? My father is a child of partition, right? My father was born in 1947 in what's now West Punjab in Pakistan, in an area called Sargodha, which is in Punjab. And his family, he was a baby when India got its independence, but also when Punjab was cut into two, right, between these two new nation states free from British rule. India and Pakistan, and tons of people were killed in that mass migration. So, when I think about home, it's not in, and when I think about my connection to South Asia and Punjab, it's not in in this sense of Indian pride. Actually, far from it. I actually don't take any pride in really any nation state. I think they play a role in struggles against colonization. But the nation state, I think, in so many ways has continued to be a tool of oppression and domination and division in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Like it's no different. It's no different there. And actually, what's so but I do stay engaged, right? Like I'm very interested in South Asian politics and in Punjabi politics. There's this has been a year of mass upheaval. Like literally one of perhaps the biggest mass protest movement in human history is happening right now in India with the farm workers, right? Not mostly, but led by Punjabi-Sikh farm workers. Punjab being
what's the protest about? Tell us.
Yeah, so Punjab has long been referred to as the breadbasket of India, and so this is why Punjabis and Sikhs, people that look like me, are often very associated with farming, because it is such a huge part of that region and how people make a living and have for generations. And this Modi administration, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has pushed forward 3 pieces of legislation that essentially are tools to privatize the agricultural sector even farther, which has already been decimated by companies like Monsanto and neoliberalization of India through Modi's party, but also through the Congress party, right? It's in many ways it's a very parallel to the United States, where the sort of more liberal party there is also a very corporate driven.
It's capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Both parties are quite driven by capitalism, but Modi's a particularly fascistic, authoritarian, Hindu nationalist version, not unlike our version of white nationalist fascism coming from the Trump administration. So essentially, these policies that the Modi administration are pushing benefit corporations, benefit billionaires, and really threaten to really take away the livelihood of farmers. And what's been so incredible is that farmers, including farm workers, right, people who work on farms as laborers, land owners, right, the people who own the farms, and much of the land is owned by individuals, right? Not massive multinational corporations. They've all joined together, right? And are saying this is unacceptable. And we're seeing folks coming together across caste lines, right? All these things that are used as tools to benefit the ruling class, right? These divisions are being obliterated. Obliterating, maybe it's an overstatement, but they're certainly being transcended in a way in this movement. Really, really powerful movement that's been going on for many months now. There was a general strike back in January, I believe, where an estimated 250 million people came out, right? Which is considered the largest protest in human history. Like, I can't even wrap my head around what that means. And it's been reverberating around the world, right? I was just at a solidarity protest here in LA, where I am at the moment, last week, and the community is really mobilized around this. And anyone who wasn't sure about Modi and what he was about knows now. So I think there's a real growing anger towards his administration and what they represent.
I'm gonna have to ask you a question after this, but I want to play this song right now because we're going to cover a lot. But one of the things that in starting Sama that I wanted to do is I wanted to reach people like Modi. I wanted to reach people like Trump and get them to open up their hearts somehow. Telling them they're wrong and they're idiots doesn't work. I tried the same with my own family. It just doesn't work. But as an artist, what do you think you can do to get them to open up their hearts, to kind of see, because that's what music and art does. It weaves. So I'm going to play this, then I'm going to ask you that question again. This is Mitra Paraya. I don't see the whole Mitra Paya Nu. Tell me what that means.
Mitra Pyare Nu. So this refers to Mitra is a word for friend or beloved. And so it's that idea of the divine as one's beloved friend.
Okay. Sonny Singh. on Sama.
मित्र प्यारे नू हाल मुरीदा दा कहना मित्र प्यारे नू हाल मुरीदा दा कहना तुद बिन रोग रजाया दा ओडना तुद बिन रोग रजाया नागन वासा दे रेना मित्र प्यारे मित्र प्यारे हाल मुरीदा दा कहना मित्र प्यारे हाल मुरीदा दा कहना हाल मुरीदा दा कहना हाल मुरीदा दा कहना
Sonny Singh on Sama. That's beautiful. So, how does this music reach people like Modi, Bolsonaro, various members of the current Republican administration? How does this open up their hearts and see people as people, not as the other or a threat?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about social change and human change and don't want to believe that Modi's a lost cause, but I think Trump's and Modi's are probably lost causes, but their supporters aren't necessarily, right? Or some of their supporters might not be, and I deeply believe that humans are not born with bigoted ideas and not born or designed to perpetuate oppression and hatred and greed and inequities, right? That's not how we're built. I don't think it's human nature, and thus our job is to unlearn, right? Our job is to open folks up, and there's ways that I can approach it as a community organizer, which I've done at various points in my life. There's ways that I can approach it as a popular educator, which is something I still do a lot of now. And then there's ways that I can approach it as a musician and an artist. And I think what's so special, which you kind of implied about this tool that we have as musicians, but also artists more broadly, is we have the ability to make people feel things, right? We have a way to get in and make people feel things that they might not otherwise feel, right? They might not feel it if I just tell them, right? Or I try to explain, if I try to like break down the history for them in a really sharp PowerPoint presentation or a really compelling speech, or even a really great workshop, which I've been known to facilitate some workshops from time to time about racial justice issues. And, I just think music is a tool that, we don't need a strategy in music work. We might need a strategy in our workshop or in our organizing campaign. In fact, we definitely do. But with music, I try to not go there, right? I try to be true to what my heart is saying, and hope that it connects with people, right? I can't make it connect, but I hope that it connects. And this whole record that I'm working on and that I'm putting out, and I've put out 3 tracks of so far. I've written like a few lines of lyrics for the whole album. Almost all of the lyrics was written either hundreds of years ago and maybe most recently like 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our ancestors have been challenging these narratives, these dominant narratives of oppression, whether it's based on gender, whether it's based on race, whether it's based on religion, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I don't know. I think also. So I'm answering this as an artist, but also like, what is the role of spirituality? What is the role of religion in our liberation struggles? And I think that role is also really, really powerful, right? We see it in sort of like Catholic liberation theology traditions. We see it in a lot of Buddhist traditions. We see it in the Sufi tradition, right? That connection to the divine is an impetus for fighting for justice. Mm-hmm. And that's like literally why the Sikh community exists. And so for me, I think part of my objective here is, Sikhs and non-Sikhs alike who are familiar with this poetry, who are familiar with this scripture, may have heard these lines before, are gonna have a connection to it, right? They might be a little bit challenged by my musical approach. They're hearing instruments they haven't heard, but I'm hoping that that's an entry point into being moved to something, right? Like if people are feeling something when they hear this, I feel like I'm on the right track, right? If people are indifferent to it, then I should probably start all over and scrap it and write a new album. That's my initial thoughts.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And it's complex, obviously, but I think this music, your music specifically, it alleviates fear. And I think of Modi, and I think of Trump, and I think of people like that. I think of people who you kind of come to that from a place of fear. And you never lose that fear, and nothing alleviates art like nothing alleviates fear like art, and nothing alleviates fear like music. You could fall in love with it as a direct connection, and specifically in this kind of space with music with intention.
Yeah.
You have something for us right now, right?
A musical.
Yeah,
offering?
you said you wanted to do something live.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna do, inspired by this idea of music as a way to break down fear, and the sort of like many ways we can approach this. To me, improvisation is one of those things that long has been a vehicle for liberation, like internally and externally. So it's there's not a ton of improvisation on my record. But it's an important part of my musical expression. So I'm just gonna do a little, meditative trumpet improvisation for a moment or two.
Please.
Yeah, does that sound good?
That sounds awesome.
Okay. Let's turn up the reverb a little bit for this.
Sonny. Sonny Singh, that was lovely. You got some
Thank you.
chops, dude.
Thank you.
Seriously. Quick question. Elizabeth, what age did you move to and live in Phoenix?
I moved to Phoenix at the age of 11, 1991.
Okay. That's before Phoenix blew up.
Yeah, I grew up in some interesting cities, Charlotte, and Phoenix, and yeah, came to Brooklyn in 2003 and never turned back.
Okay. And Brooklyn's home for
It
a while
is.
at least. And now
It
you
is.
now,
Yeah.
now you're in LA.
Yeah. It's been a bit. Yeah. It's 17, 18 years in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Gurav said something really interesting. People don't necessarily need to be brought to understanding. Sometimes interrupting violence is the most important thing. True, as it's happening. But I'd love, I don't know anything that's better than the artistic expression of music with chops, with a legacy, with tradition, with heritage that's been kind of fused or manifested or through alchemy into
Mm.
something that impacts the situation that's happening right now, which is one of the things that really intrigued me when you first sent your music to me, because I've been a bigger fan of Red Baraat. You guys, great live show, loved having you on KXP. But when I was hearing this and when I got the story, it's like, but there's something going on here that feels very timely. Like starting
Mm.
Sama, this is music of a time that hopefully will help the world at large, because for often, you're not singing in English, you're not singing, in the colonizer's language, and you're singing ancient works. This music now through this channel that we're here and in general can have an impact globally, to people that have like no concept of what Sikhism is or anything like that, but it doesn't matter because there's something about it just opens up their hearts.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's my hope. I mean, that's my dream that people connect to this, certainly not just in the Sikh community or even South Asians more broadly. But I hope there's something in this that lots of folks can connect to from lots of different backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they will. And so you had the Kickstarter campaign,
I did.
and which we played for. Are you done? Do you need more cash to finish the thing?
I don't need the Kickstarter's over. The funds for the album are pretty much secured. Obviously, it's been a tough year for music. So
Yeah.
in terms of being able to make a living as a musician, that's been completely obliterated. But I feel very lucky in many ways. I've been okay. And yeah, I think in terms of support more than anything, if people are feeling it, I hope they will listen to it on all the platforms and share it and just stay in touch,
Absolutely. And you have a Bandcamp, yes?
I have a Bandcamp. Yep. Bandcamp,
Okay.
Spotify, iTunes, all
Go.
those things.
I love them all, but Bandcamp is actually, especially on Bandcamp Fridays, all the proceeds go to the artists. You got some merch?
Not at the merch phase yet, much
Okay.
to the dismay of my manager.
I bet, because I would be sporting a Sonny Singh playing a trumpet T-shirt. So hopefully that will happen soon. And thanks for doing this. Thanks for sharing your story. Look forward to having you come here or wherever and playing live, because I do believe this. We're going to have a renaissance. And
Yes.
you're going to get booked like crazy. It'll be like, in the 70s when the same salsa band had to play 3 club nights, Queens, Bronx, Brooklyn, and, on the same night. And it's going to be like that. Clubs around here are already starting to say, like, I think we're going to have to start booking 3 shows a night, starting at like 4 and closing with a DJ set. So I'm hoping that's the truth, that'll happen. And I look forward to seeing you. I'm gonna say bye now, but I wanna we're gonna finish with the video. What's the song? about?
Koi Bole Ram. So this is an anthem of religious unity and pluralism, written by from the Sikh scriptures as well, and thinking about that message of religious unity and pluralism that's in this one. It is directly confronting the Hindu nationalist agenda of the Modi government. So we'll see a lot of footage from that movement in this video.
Perfect. Thank you, Sonny.
Thanks
Best
for
of
having
luck.
me.
Stay safe. And, we're still in the middle of this thing. So please, unless you're vaccinated, even if you're vaccinated,
Yes.
wear a mask. It's the new normal. Thank you for being part of Sama.
Thanks for having me.
Music and art. Let's see. I've got some special surprises coming up a little bit later that I'll announce. But I want to thank Seattle Theater Group and Live in Bamako, Mali. I want to thank Christine. And I want to thank, I want to thank Christine. I want to thank Dagmara and everybody else that makes this happen. This is Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art. Bye.
Azadi! Azadi!
Karan Kareem, Kirpa Tar Rahim, Karan Kareem.